My name is Rebecca Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and last year I died. Well, technically. The doctors told my parents I wouldn't survive the night. Their response? She's not our real daughter. We owe her nothing. Then they left me to die alone. A week later, they showed up at my grandmother's house, ready to claim the inheritance she left me. But my bed was empty, just a letter waiting. And when they read it, their lives fell apart. If you're watching this from somewhere you felt abandoned too, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I rewrote my ending. I grew up in a quaint suburb of Boston, in a white colonial with blue shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn. From the outside, we were the quintessential American family: mother, father, 2 daughters. My childhood photos show birthday parties with matching decorations, Christmas mornings with piles of presents, family vacations to Disney World. But photos can lie. My first memory of feeling different was at age 5. My sister Allison had knocked over a vase while running through the living room. When my mother came rushing in, I was already picking up the pieces. "What happened here?" she demanded. "I did it," I said automatically, not even thinking about it. Later, I overheard my mother on the phone. "Rebecca's always been so eager to please. Not like Allison. Allison has spirit." Spirit. That was the word my parents used when Allison threw tantrums in stores, when she refused to eat her vegetables, when she talked back. When I did my homework without being asked, it was because I was dutiful. When Allison finally did hers, she was brilliant. The differences were subtle at first. Allison got the bigger bedroom. Allison got to choose restaurants on family night. Allison's artwork covered the refrigerator while mine was neatly filed away in a drawer. "Your sister needs more encouragement," my father explained when I asked why my straight A's didn't earn the same celebration as Allison's B-. "You're naturally good at school." I was 12 when I finally learned why. It was past midnight, and I'd gotten up for a glass of water. My parents were arguing in the kitchen, voices carrying up the stairs. "You've always favored Allison," my mother hissed. "It's like you're trying to make up for Rebecca not being yours." "She's not yours either, Margaret," my father shot back. We agreed when we took her that we'd never treat her differently. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. The arguing stopped. I ran back to my room, heart pounding, and pretended to be asleep when my mother checked on me. Adopted. The word explained everything and nothing at the same time. Why my hair was dark when everyone else's was blonde. Why I had green eyes when they all had blue. Why no matter how hard I tried, I never quite belonged. The next morning at breakfast, I waited for them to tell me. To explain. To reassure me that I was loved just the same. They said nothing, so I did. "I heard you last night," I said, my voice small but steady. "I know I'm adopted." My father's newspaper lowered slightly. My mother paused while pouring coffee. Then she smiled, that tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Rebecca. You must have been dreaming." And that was it. No confirmation. No denial that felt like truth. Just gaslighting and breakfast as usual. I learned that day that in our house, truth was less important than appearance. After that, I threw myself into being perfect. If I couldn't be loved for who I was, perhaps I could be valued for what I achieved. I graduated top of my class in high school. Got a full scholarship to MIT. Started my first tech company at 22. My parents attended my graduation, of course. They smiled for photos and accepted congratulations for having raised such an accomplished daughter. But there was always distance in their eyes, as if they were looking at a project rather than a person. Only my grandmother Martha saw me. Really saw me. She lived in a beautiful old Victorian house in Cambridge, filled with books and antiques and the smell of cinnamon. I spent every summer with her from age 13 onward, after the adoption revelation. "You have your mother's eyes," she told me once, when I was 15. It was the only acknowledgement from any family member that I had biological parents somewhere. "Who was she?" I asked. Grandmother Martha patted my hand. Someone who loved you very much, but couldn't keep you. Someday, when you're older, I'll tell you everything. But someday kept getting postponed. Throughout college, whenever I asked, she'd say, after you graduate. After graduation, it was, when you're settled in your career. Later, it became, when the time is right. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents deteriorated further. My father's law firm represented my main competitor in a patent dispute. When I confronted him about the conflict of interest, he simply said, "Family is one thing. Business is another." Allison became a surgeon, following in our father's footsteps, though he'd switched to corporate law long before we were born. Their shared medical background became yet another thing that excluded me from family conversations. The final estrangement happened 3 years ago, at Thanksgiving dinner. Grandmother Martha was there, frilier than I remembered, but still sharp as ever. Conversation turned to my company's recent success. We'd just secured major funding for an AI-powered medical diagnostic tool. "I always knew Rebecca would do something special," Grandmother said proudly. "Yes, well, she always was determined to prove herself," my mother replied with that familiar dismissive tone. "Prove myself," I echoed. "Is that what you think I've been doing all these years?" "Isn't it?" my father asked, sipping his wine. "Most adopted children go through a phase of overachievement. It's quite common, actually." The casual confirmation of what they denied for 15 years stunned me into silence. "Dad?" Allison looked shocked. "What are you saying?" "Oh, she knows," my mother waved dismissively. "She's known since she was 12. Though I don't see why we need to discuss it at dinner." "You've denied it my entire life," I said, my voice shaking. "Every time I asked, you made me feel crazy for even suggesting it." "We thought it was better that way," my father replied, as if explaining something to a difficult client. "Children need stability." "I needed truth," I countered. "The truth is," my mother said with sudden sharpness, "we gave you everything. A beautiful home, the best education, every advantage. Most adopted children would be grateful." Grandmother Martha's hand came down hard on the table. "That's enough, Margaret." But it wasn't enough. 20 years of feeling like an outsider, of conditional love, of gaslit reality came pouring out. "You never wanted me," I said. "You wanted the idea of me. The perfect daughter you could show off at parties. The one who would validate your parenting without ever demanding actual parenting from you." I stood up, napkin falling to the floor. "I'm done trying to earn love that should have been freely given." I left that night and didn't look back. Changed my phone number. Moved to a new apartment. Grandmother Martha was the only one I stayed in touch with, meeting for our weekly Sunday brunches away from my parents' house. "They do love you," she insisted once. "They just don't know how to show it." "Love isn't supposed to be this hard," I replied. "She died 6 months ago, peacefully in her sleep. I was traveling for work and missed the funeral. My parents didn't bother to call me about it. I found out through an attorney's letter, informing me that Grandmother Martha had left me her house and the majority of her estate. I never got to hear the truth about my birth parents from her lips. But fate had other plans for revealing family secrets. The day of the accident started like any other Tuesday. I was at our company headquarters in Cambridge, running tests on our newest software update. It was raining, that gentle, persistent New England drizzle that makes everything gray and slightly blurred at the edges. "You should head home," Rebecca, my business partner Samantha, suggested around 8. "The update can wait until morning." But I've never been good at leaving things unfinished. By the time I finally left, it was after 10 and the rain had turned into a downpour. I remember thinking I should call a car service, but my apartment was only 15 minutes away. What could happen in 15 minutes? The intersection of Maple and 3rd has a blind spot that locals know to watch for. The drunk driver who hit me wasn't local. I remember headlights suddenly filling my car, impossibly bright. The sound of metal crushing metal. The strange sensation of spinning. They told me later that my car flipped twice before hitting a lamppost. The impact deployed the airbags, which saved my life but fractured 3 ribs and my collarbone. My head hit the side window hard enough to cause a traumatic brain injury. I have flashes of memory from the ambulance. Red lights pulsing. A paramedic saying my name over and over. The oxygen mask over my face. Then darkness. When I next became aware, it was of voices. Distant, clinical. I couldn't open my eyes or move, but I could hear. This state, conscious but unable to respond, would later be explained as a result of the brain injury and the medically induced coma they placed me in to reduce swelling. Significant trauma to the temporal lobe, a woman's voice was saying. We've managed to control the intracranial pressure, but the next 24 hours will be critical. Have we located next of kin? Another voice, male this time. Emergency contact in her phone is listed as mother. We've called, they're on their way. Time has no meaning when you're floating in darkness. I don't know if it was minutes or hours later when I heard them arrive. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell? I'm Dr. Chin, the neurologist managing your daughter's case. What happened? My father's voice, tense and controlled as always. Dr. Chin explained the accident, my injuries, the induced coma, the uncertain prognosis. And what exactly are you doing for her? My mother, sounding irritated, as if my traumatic brain injury was an inconvenience in her schedule. Currently, we're monitoring intracranial pressure and maintaining the coma to give her brain time to heal. She'll need surgery once she's stabilized to repair the orbital fracture. Surgery? My father again. What kind of costs are we looking at here? There was a pause. I imagine Dr. Chin was giving them the look medical professionals reserve for particularly callous family members. Your insurance information would be helpful, she finally said. And we'll need authorization for the surgical procedure. There's been a misunderstanding, my mother said, her voice dropping. Rebecca isn't actually our daughter. I'm sorry. The doctor sounded confused. She has you listed as her emergency contacts. She was adopted, my father explained smoothly. Informally, the papers were never properly filed. I see. The doctor's voice had cooled significantly. Nevertheless, as her emergency contacts. You're not understanding me, my mother interrupted. She's not our responsibility. We owe her nothing. I'd experienced their emotional abandonment my entire life, but this was different. This was leaving me to die. Without authorization for treatment, the doctor began. Then don't treat her, my father said simply. Isn't there a state fund for indigent patients or something? Mr. Mitchell, your daughter is critically injured. Without surgery. She's not our daughter, my mother insisted. Not legally. Not really. There was silence, then the sound of papers rustling. There's also the matter of Martha Mitchell's estate, a new voice said. A nurse, maybe? The patient was notified as the primary beneficiary. That's a family matter, my father said quickly. My mother was not in her right mind when she made that will. We've been meaning to contest it. I see, the doctor said coldly. Well, in the absence of family willing to authorize treatment, we'll have to proceed under emergency provisions. Nurse Davis, please document this conversation and contact hospital legal. We'll be going now, my mother announced. Please don't contact us again regarding this patient. Footsteps. The door opening and closing. They were gone. I tried to scream, to move, to give any sign that I could hear them abandoning me. But I was trapped in my broken body, a prisoner of my own consciousness. I've never seen anything like it, the nurse, Davis, apparently, said quietly. Their own daughter. Rich people, the doctor muttered. Call legal, then check her phone for other contacts. There must be someone who gives a damn about this woman. Time passed. I drifted in and out of awareness. Pain came and went as medication flowed through my system. Different voices spoke around me, medical jargon I couldn't fully comprehend. But one voice became familiar. Gentle. Constant. I'm just changing your Rebecca. You're doing great. Nurse Emily Davis became my lifeline. She talked to me during her shifts, updating me on my condition, explaining the treatments, telling me about the weather outside. She'd play music from her phone, everything from classical to Taylor Swift. "The latest research shows coma patients can hear us," she told someone. I'm not leaving her alone. Not after what her parents did. 3 days after the accident, through Emily's one-sided conversations, I learned that the hospital had located Samantha. My business partner and friend had rushed to the hospital, authorized the treatments, and was fighting my parents on multiple fronts. "Your friend is something else," Emily told me during a sponge bath. "She's got her lawyer here every day, making sure you get everything you need. Apparently, your parents are already making moves on your grandmother's estate, claiming you're incapacitated." I wanted to laugh at the irony. They abandoned me to die, then tried to use my resulting condition to steal my inheritance. It was so perfectly on brand for them. The surgery happened on day 5. I remember being wheeled somewhere, bright lights overhead, then nothing until waking in recovery with a pounding headache and Emily's voice. "You did it, Rebecca. Surgery went perfectly. Dr. Chin says your brain swelling is already reducing. They're going to start bringing you out of the coma tomorrow." True consciousness returned gradually. First the ability to squeeze a hand when asked. Then opening my eyes to blinding light. Then the agonizing process of having the breathing tube removed. Where? My first word croaked through lips that felt alien. "Massachusetts General," Emily answered, appearing in my field of vision. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." But I wasn't okay. Not really. Because now I had to process what I'd heard. My parents had not only abandoned me my entire life, they had literally left me to die. Recovery was excruciating. Every movement sent shards of pain through my broken body. The first time they helped me sit up, I vomited from the vertigo. The first steps I took with the physical therapist left me drenched in sweat and tears. But physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological wound of knowing my parents had walked away when I needed them most. That knowledge sat like poison in my veins, tainting every moment of recovery. "You're doing amazing," Samantha would say during her daily visits. She'd brought my laptop, handled company decisions, fielded press inquiries about my accident. "The doctors say you're recovering twice as fast as expected." Spite is a powerful motivator, I joked weakly. It was during the second week of my hospital stay that Samantha finally told me about grandmother Martha. "I didn't want to add to your stress," she explained, sitting in the visitor's chair beside my bed. "But you should know. Your grandmother's attorney has been trying to reach you. Your parents are challenging the will." "What?" I struggled to sit up straighter. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming you're mentally incompetent due to your injuries." Samantha's expression was grim. "They filed the paperwork 3 days after your accident. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd walked out of my hospital room, leaving me to die, and gone straight to a lawyer to steal my inheritance." "I need to talk to her attorney," I insisted. James Wright arrived the next morning, a dignified man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been my grandmother's attorney for 30 years. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted me formally. "I'm relieved to see you recovering. Your grandmother would be pleased." "My parents are trying to steal her house," I said without preamble. He nodded, placing his briefcase on the bedside table. "They filed for an emergency conservatorship, citing your medical condition. I've submitted medical reports from your doctors confirming you're competent to manage your affairs. The judge has temporarily frozen the estate until you can appear in court." "When?" "That's up to your medical team. There's no rush. The assets are secure." He pulled out a thick envelope from his briefcase. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this if anything happened to her before she could tell you herself." The envelope felt heavy in my hands. "What is it?" "The truth, I believe." He stood to leave. "She loved you very much, Rebecca." "Never doubt that." I waited until evening to open it, after the nurses had finished their rounds and the hospital had quieted for the night. Inside was a letter written in my grandmother's elegant script and several official-looking documents. My dearest Rebecca, the letter began. If you're reading this, I've failed to keep my promise to tell you everything in person. Forgive an old woman's cowardice. Some truths are harder to speak aloud than others. You've wondered about your birth parents all your life. The truth is, your mother was my niece, Caroline. She was 18 when she got pregnant, young, scared, and in no position to raise a child. Your biological father was her high school boyfriend who left for college and wanted nothing to do with the baby. I suggested adoption within the family. My son Richard and his wife Margaret had been trying for a child without success. It seemed the perfect solution. You would remain connected to your biological family, and they would have the baby they desperately wanted. What I didn't know then was that Margaret was already pregnant with Allison. She learned this just weeks after they took you home. Suddenly, they had 2 infant daughters instead of 1. I watched over the years as they treated you differently. I confronted Richard about it many times. He would always promise to do better, to love you equally. But some people cannot love what doesn't come from their own blood, no matter how precious the gift. The legal adoption was completed. Regardless of what they may have told you, you are legally their daughter, with all the rights that entails. I've included the court documents proving this. I've also included the truth about your birth mother. Caroline died 5 years ago in a car accident, having never married or had other children. She asked about you often. I kept her updated on your accomplishments, your growth into the remarkable woman you've become. The house and everything I leave to you is rightfully yours, not just by my choice, but by blood. You are my family in every way that matters. I hope you can forgive me for not telling you sooner. I thought I was protecting you, but perhaps I was really protecting myself from having to explain my role in placing you with parents who couldn't love you as you deserved. Know that I have loved you completely from the moment Caroline placed you in my arms. All my love, always. Grandmother Martha. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I examined the documents, my original birth certificate naming Caroline Mitchell as my mother, the adoption papers with my parents' signatures, the amended birth certificate listing Margaret and Richard Mitchell as my parents. It was all there. The truth. The proof. The confirmation that legally, morally, and by blood, I was a Mitchell. And my parents had lied, to the doctors, probably to Allison, and certainly to themselves. That night, I made 2 decisions. First, I would recover fully, no matter how hard I had to work. And second, I would make sure my parents faced the consequences of their actions. I threw myself into physical therapy with renewed determination. 2 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, facial fractures, and traumatic brain injury. None of it would stop me. I graduated from Walker to Kane within weeks, surprising even my therapists. You're a machine, my physical therapist Jake commented during one particularly grueling session. I have somewhere important to be, I replied, pushing through the pain to complete another set of exercises. For weeks after the accident, Dr. Chen cleared me for discharge. Emily helped me pack up the cards, flowers, and gifts that had accumulated in my room, most from colleagues and friends, none from family. What now? Emily asked as she wheeled me toward the hospital exit where Samantha waited with her car. I looked up at the nurse who had advocated for me when my own family wouldn't. Now I go home and write a letter. As Samantha drove me to her apartment, where I'd be staying during outpatient recovery, I stared out the window at the Boston streets. Somewhere across town, my parents were probably still plotting, still lying, still expecting to get away with it all. They had no idea what was coming. Samantha's guest room became my war room. On the wall, I created a timeline of events, connecting my accident to my parents' legal maneuvers. My laptop became command central as I gathered evidence and formulated strategy. You should be resting, Samantha worried, bringing me tea one evening. I'll rest when it's done, I replied, not looking up from the email I was writing to James Wright. My first step was securing my legal position. James confirmed what grandmother's letter had stated. My adoption was completely legal. My parents' claim that it was informal was an outright lie. They have no case for contesting the will, James assured me during one of our daily calls. But they're trying another angle now, claiming that as your parents, they should be your legal guardians during your recovery. After abandoning me at the hospital, I was incredulous. They're saying it was a misunderstanding, that they were in shock. They've submitted affidavits claiming deep concern for your welfare. I bet they have. I thought of the hospital security footage Emily had mentioned. Can we subpoena the hospital records? There were security cameras in my room. Already done, James said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The footage contradicts their affidavits rather dramatically. Next came property security. Grandmother's house stood empty while the estate was in probate, but I knew my parents still had keys. I hired a security company to change the locks and install cameras throughout the property. We can set up remote monitoring, the security consultant explained. You'll be able to see any activity in real time on your phone or computer. Perfect, I said. And I want the footage backed up to a secure cloud server. Then came the most difficult part, writing the letter. I must have drafted it 20 different times, ranging from rage-filled accusations to cold, clinical facts. None of it felt right. You're overthinking it, Samantha said one night as I crumpled yet another attempt. Just speak from your heart. My heart wants to burn their world down, I admitted. Then say that. I shook my head. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. It's about finally being seen. The breakthrough came during a session with Dr. Morris, the therapist I'd been seeing since leaving the hospital. What do you really want from them? She asked after I'd explained the situation. I want them to acknowledge what they did. Not just at the hospital, but my whole life. And if they never do? The question hit me like a physical blow. Then I want to be free of needing them to. That night, I wrote the letter that would be waiting for them. Not from a place of anger, but from a place of clarity. I detailed their decades of emotional neglect, the lies about my adoption, and their ultimate betrayal at the hospital. I included copies of the security footage showing them abandoning me and copies of the legal documents proving my adoption was legitimate. But I also included forgiveness, not for their sake, but for mine. I was releasing them from any obligation to me and releasing myself from any obligation to them. I no longer need your approval, your acknowledgement, or your love, I wrote in the final paragraph. I am whole without you. I sealed the letter in an envelope and gave it to James to place in the house when the time was right. The final piece fell into place when James called to inform me my parents had scheduled a visit to grandmother's house, ostensibly to collect personal mementos before the estate was settled. They filed the paperwork with the probate court, he explained. They're coming this Saturday at 2 p.m. Will Allison be with them? I hadn't spoken to my sister since Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I had no idea if she knew what our parents had done. Yes, she's listed on the court filing. I took a deep breath. Then it's time. That Saturday morning, James placed my letter on the dining room table in grandmother's house. The security company confirmed the cameras were operational. Samantha and I settled in at her apartment to watch the feed on my laptop. At exactly 2:03 p.m., my parents' Mercedes pulled into the driveway. The plan was in motion and there was no turning back. Through the security cameras, I watched my parents and Allison approach grandmother's front door. My father looked annoyed, checking his watch repeatedly. My mother wore her charity event smile, the one that never reached her eyes. Allison hung back slightly, her expression unreadable. The key isn't working, my father complained, jiggling the doorknob. Did you try the back door? My mother suggested. I shouldn't have to try the back door. This is my mother's house. Allison corrected quietly. Was her house. My father shot her a look before pulling out his phone. After a brief conversation, a locksmith arrived. I watched as he opened the door, had my father sign some paperwork, and departed. Finally, my mother said, stepping inside, Richard, check if the silver is still here. I want to make sure Rebecca hasn't already emptied the place. The casual accusation made my blood boil. Samantha placed a hand on my shoulder. "Remember why we're doing this," she murmured. I nodded, focusing on the screens as my family moved through my grandmother's house. "Everything looks the same," Allison commented, running her fingers along the antique sideboard in the hallway. "Mother always did have good taste," my mother admitted, examining a crystal vase. "This would look perfect in our foyer." "We're here for your father's childhood mementos," Allison reminded her. "Not to shop." "Don't be naive," my mother snapped. "Rebecca is never going to recover enough to claim this inheritance. The judge will award guardianship to us, and then everything here will be ours anyway." "She's in physical therapy now," Allison said. "Her doctors say she's making remarkable progress." "Well, her brain injury is another matter," my father interjected, coming down the stairs. "The silver is all there, Margaret." I checked the master bedroom too. Nothing seems disturbed. "Has anyone actually visited her recently?" Allison asked. "To see how she's doing?" My parents exchanged a glance. "The hospital staff have been very uncooperative," my mother said primly. "Besides, you know how Rebecca is. She's always been so independent." "Too independent," my father muttered. "If she'd listened to me about that driving route." "Are you seriously blaming her for getting hit by a drunk driver?" Allison sounded incredulous. "Of course not," my mother soothed. "Your father is just upset. This has been hard on all of us." They moved into the dining room, where my letter waited on the polished mahogany table. "What's this?" My father picked up the envelope. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's handwriting. James had used an old birthday card as reference. "It's addressed to Rebecca," Allison pointed out. "Well, she's not here, is she?" My mother plucked it from my father's hands and tore it open. As she began reading, her face drained of color. "What? What is it?" my father demanded. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. He skimmed it, his expression darkening with each page. "This is outrageous," he spluttered finally. "Lies and manipulations. What does it say?" Allison reached for the letter, but my father held it away. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Family business." "I am family," Allison insisted, snatching the letter from his hand. She began reading, her eyes widening. "Mom? Dad? What is this about abandoning Rebecca at the hospital?" My mother collapsed dramatically into a dining chair. "It wasn't like that. We were in shock. The doctors were so pessimistic. It says here you told them she wasn't your real daughter and you owed her nothing." Allison's voice shook. "That you left without authorizing treatment. That's taken out of context," my father blustered. "We merely explained that the adoption was complicated." Allison continued reading, her face growing paler. "There's a link to security footage." She pulled out her phone and typed in the URL from the letter. For several minutes, the dining room was silent except for the tinny audio coming from Allison's phone, my parents' voices clearly stating I wasn't their daughter, that they owed me nothing, that they wouldn't authorize treatment. "You left her to die," Allison whispered when the video ended. "Your own daughter." "She's not," my mother began, then stopped herself. "Not what? Not your daughter?" "Because according to these documents, she absolutely is." Allison brandished the adoption papers included with the letter. "You legally adopted her. You raised her for 28 years. And then you abandoned her when she needed you most." "You don't understand the complexities," my father started. "I understand perfectly," Allison cut him off. "I've always known you treated her differently. I thought it was because she was so self-sufficient, so competent. I never imagined it was because you didn't consider her your real daughter." My mother straightened, reverting to the haughty demeanor she used when challenged. "We gave her everything. An excellent education, every opportunity. Except love," Allison finished. "Except the one thing she actually needed." On the security feed, I watched my sister's realization unfold. The pieces falling into place. The recognition of patterns she'd observed but never understood. All those times you dismissed her achievements, she said slowly. All those times you made her feel less than. It wasn't because you had high standards. It was because you didn't think she belonged. That's not true, my father insisted. We always wanted the best for her. The best. Allison's voice rose. You left her with brain trauma and broken bones to die alone in a hospital. How is that the best? My mother stood suddenly. We need to find Rebecca. She's clearly been poisoned against us. That Samantha person has always been a bad influence. She knows about the conservatorship filing, doesn't she? My father realized, scanning the letter again. She knows we're trying to take control of Mother's estate. Is that all you care about? Allison asked incredulously. The money? The house? What about your daughter who nearly died? Of course we care about Rebecca, my mother said automatically. But we have to be practical. In her condition. Her condition that you made worse by abandoning her, Allison interrupted. Her condition that you're now trying to exploit to steal her inheritance. My father's face hardened. That's enough, Allison. This doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me? Rebecca is my sister. Half-sister, my mother corrected reflexively, then pressed her hand to her mouth as if trying to push the words back in. Allison stared at her. So it's true. You really don't think of her as family. The realization seemed to physically pain her. She gathered the letter and documents with trembling hands. I can't be here right now. I can't be near either of you. Allison, wait, my father called as she headed for the door. I'll be at my apartment. Don't call me. I need time to process. This? She gestured vaguely at them. All of this. After she left, my parents stood in stunned silence. Now look what you've done, my mother finally hissed. You've turned Allison against us too. Me? You're the one who called Rebecca her half-sister. Well, she is. And now both our daughters hate us and Rebecca is going to use this letter and that video to destroy us in court. My father paced the dining room, running his hands through his thinning hair. We need to call Gerald. Their lawyer. He'll know how to spin this. We can say we were distraught, not thinking clearly. The video, Richard. The video shows us perfectly calm, perfectly clear. We'll say it was edited. Deepfakes are everywhere these days. My mother sank back into the chair. This is a nightmare. They continued plotting for another hour, calling their lawyer, searching the house for valuables they could claim as family heirlooms, making lists of potential character witnesses who could testify to their parental devotion. It was painful to watch, but also illuminating. They never once expressed concern for my well-being. Never once questioned whether their treatment of me had been wrong. They were solely focused on damage control, on preserving their reputation and access to my grandmother's money. When they finally left, taking several small antiques despite Allison's earlier objection, I closed the laptop. Well, Samantha said quietly. That was exactly what I expected. I finished for her. They haven't changed. They never will. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Allison. We need to talk. Please. I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The cafe on Cambridge Street. Whatever came next, I was finally ready to face it on my terms. The cafe on Cambridge Street was busy when I arrived, leaning on my cane. Allison was already there, sitting at a corner table, 2 untouched coffees in front of her. She looked up as I approached, her eyes widening at my still healing facial injuries. Rebecca. She stood awkwardly, hesitating between a hug and a handshake. We settled for an uncomfortable nod. Allison. I eased myself into the chair opposite her. You wanted to talk. She pushed one of the coffees toward me. Black with 1 sugar. You still take it that way? I nodded, surprised she remembered. Thanks. I didn't know. She blurted out. About the hospital. About them leaving you there. I swear I didn't know. I believe you. And I did. Allison had many faults, but deliberate cruelty wasn't one of them. Did you read the entire letter? She nodded miserably and watched the video. I can't believe they would do that to anyone, let alone their own daughter. Not their daughter, I corrected automatically. Not in their eyes. But you are. Legally and, well, we grew up together. You're my sister. She reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled back slightly. 28 years, Allison. 28 years of watching them love you completely while measuring out affection to me like it was a limited resource. Did you really never notice? She flushed. I noticed they were harder on you. I thought it was because you were the oldest. Or because you were so smart, they had higher expectations. They told the hospital staff I wasn't their real daughter. That they owed me nothing. My voice remained steady, but inside I felt the familiar ache. Those weren't heat-of-the-moment words. That was their truth. It's not my truth, Allison insisted. You're my sister. My big sister who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my college applications and stood up for me when I totaled Dad's car. I had done all those things. Because that's what big sisters do, even when they're jealous of the golden child. Even when they're starving for the love that's showered on their sibling. What do you want from me, Allison? She looked taken aback by the directness of the question. I want us to be sisters again. Real sisters. I've missed you these 3 years. And our parents? Where do they fit in this vision? Her expression darkened. I don't know. I'm not speaking to them right now. What they did. I can't forgive it. They'll pressure you to reconcile, I warned. They'll minimize what happened. Rewrite history. I know their playbook too. She managed a weak smile. I've had a front row seat to their revisionist history my whole life. We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe noise washing over us. Can I ask you something? Allison finally said. The letter you left them, what did it actually say? The whole thing. I took a sip of coffee, considering. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the document where I'd saved the final version. Dear Richard and Margaret, I began reading. I'm addressing you by your first names because Mom and Dad no longer feels truthful. Parents protect their children. Parents put their children's needs above their own. You have done neither. By the time you read this, you will have already tried to declare me incompetent. You will have already filed paperwork to control the inheritance grandmother Martha left me. You will have already begun crafting a narrative that paints you as concerned parents and me as an ungrateful daughter. Let me save you the effort. I am alive despite your best efforts. The doctors at Massachusetts General Hospital have documented your refusal to authorize my treatment. The security cameras captured your exact words. She's not our real daughter. We owe her nothing. For 28 years, I have tried to earn your love. I achieved academic excellence. I built a successful company. I did everything possible to make you proud. It was never enough because I was never enough. Not your blood. Not your real daughter. Grandmother Martha left me a letter explaining everything. My birth mother was her niece Caroline. The adoption was legal and binding, despite what you told the hospital staff. I've included copies of all relevant documentation. I've also included a USB drive with the hospital security footage. It will be submitted as evidence should you continue your attempts to control my inheritance or claim guardianship over me. This letter isn't about revenge. It's about truth. The truth that you couldn't love me as I deserved to be loved. The truth that when I needed you most, you chose to walk away. I forgive you. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I release you from any obligation to me, and I release myself from any obligation to you. I no longer need your approval, your acknowledgement, or your love. I am whole without you. Rebecca Mitchell. P.S. The locks have been changed, and this house is legally mine. Please direct any future communications to my attorney, James Wright. When I finished reading, Allison was crying silently. That's the most honest thing I've ever heard, she whispered. And the saddest. I put my phone away. It needed to be said. They called me 6 times yesterday. Left voicemails about how worried they are about you, how they want to help with your recovery. She shook her head in disgust. It's like they live in an alternate reality. They do, I agreed. One where they're always the heroes of the story. What happens now? She asked. With the inheritance? With the guardianship claim? James is handling it. The hospital footage alone should sink their case. After that, I shrugged. I move on. I build a life without them in it. And me? Her voice was small. Is there room in that life for me? I studied my sister, my biological half-sister, as it turned out. The golden child who had benefited from our parents' favoritism her entire life. But also the woman sitting before me now, choosing truth over comfort, choosing me over them. I don't know yet, I said honestly. There's a lot of history between us, Allison. A lot of hurt. I understand. She nodded, wiping away tears. But I'd like to try, if you're willing. I thought of Grandmother Martha's letter. A family being those who love you, not necessarily those who share your blood. Small steps, I finally said. We start small and see where it goes. The relief on her face was palpable. Small steps. I can do that. We finished our coffees, talking cautiously about neutral topics, her residency at Boston General, my company's latest projects. It wasn't comfortable yet, but it was civil. A beginning of sorts. As predicted, my parents escalated their efforts after finding the letter. They called everyone they knew in the legal community, trying to find a judge who would grant their conservatorship request. They attempted to access my medical records, claiming parental rights. They even tried to contact my doctors directly. None of it worked. The hospital footage was damning, and James Wright was relentless in protecting my interests. The conservatorship request was denied. The probate judge ruled in my favor regarding grandmother's estate. The house and everything in it was legally mine. 3 weeks after our cafe meeting, Allison called me. They're filing for a hearing to contest the adoption, she said without preamble. They're claiming Grandmother Martha coerced them into adopting you, that they never wanted to in the first place. The words should have hurt. Instead, I felt oddly calm. Let them. The documentation is clear. The adoption was legal. It's not about winning for them anymore, Allison said sadly. It's about hurting you. I know. I'd always known. How are you holding up? I moved out of my apartment. I'm staying with a friend from the hospital. I couldn't be near them right now. I'm sorry. And I was. Despite everything, Allison was losing her parents too, the loving, devoted parents she had known her whole life. Learning they were capable of such cruelty must have shattered her world. Don't be. It's not your fault. She paused. Actually, I was wondering, your grandmother's house is pretty big, right? I smiled despite myself. Are you inviting yourself to live with me, Allison? Just temporarily, she said quickly. Until I find a new place. And only if you're comfortable with it. It was a big step. Bigger than coffee at a cafe. But perhaps it was time for big steps. The East Wing has its own bathroom, I told her. And I'm rarely home before 8 anyway. Really? You mean it? Small steps, remember? We'll see how it goes. After we hung up, I sat looking out the window of my temporary apartment. Somewhere across town, my parents were plotting their next move, still unable to accept the truth of what they'd done. Still unable to see me as their daughter deserving of love. But for the first time since the accident, I wasn't defined by their rejection. I was defined by my survival, my resilience, and the family I was choosing to build around me. The letter had done its work. Not by changing them, nothing could do that, but by freeing me from needing them to change. 6 months after the accident, Dr. Chin declared my physical recovery complete. The last cast came off, the final follow-up MRI showed no remaining brain trauma, and my physical therapy sessions were reduced to once a month for maintenance. You're a medical miracle, she told me during our final appointment. Most patients with your injuries would still be in intensive rehab. I had good motivation, I replied, thinking of the letter, of my parents, of the life I was determined to reclaim. I moved into Grandmother Martha's house, my house now, in early spring. The Victorian needed updates, but I left the bones of it intact. The intricate woodwork, the stained glass transoms, the wide porch where grandmother and I had spent summer evenings discussing books and dreams. Allison moved into the East Wing as planned. Our cohabitation was awkward at first. Too many childhood patterns to unlearn, too many sensitivities to navigate. But we established ground rules and respected each other's space. Slowly, tentatively, we began building a relationship based on choice rather than obligation. My business partner Samantha became a frequent visitor, as did Nurse Emily, who'd left the hospital to work for a home healthcare agency. James Wright joined us for Sunday brunches, continuing the tradition I'd shared with grandmother Martha. "You've created quite the family here," he commented one Sunday, watching Allison and Emily debate the merits of different medical specialties while Samantha set the table. "Chosen family," I corrected gently. "The best kind." My parents made one final attempt to reassert control. They filed a lawsuit claiming emotional distress, arguing that my letter and the hospital footage had caused them significant psychological harm. It was a desperate move, transparently vindictive. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice, ruling that truth could not be considered harmful speech. In his written opinion, he noted that they had abandoned their daughter in her time of greatest need and were now seeking to punish her for merely documenting that abandonment. The ruling made local news. Former colleagues, distant relatives, and country club friends all learned what Richard and Margaret Mitchell had done. Their carefully cultivated social standing crumbled overnight. They left Boston a month later, relocating to Florida without saying goodbye to either of their daughters. "Are you okay?" Allison asked when we heard the news. "About them leaving?" I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I said finally. "I think I am." The truth was, they had left me long before they physically departed. Perhaps they had never really been with me at all. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my attention to the future. My tech company had thrived even during my absence, thanks to Samantha's leadership. Now we were developing new software inspired by my hospital experience, a communication system for patients with traumatic brain injuries who couldn't speak but remained conscious. "We're calling it Bridge Gap," I explained to Emily over dinner. "It tracks eye movement and brain activity to help doctors determine consciousness levels in non-responsive patients." "That would have helped you," she noted. "It would have helped the doctors," I corrected. I knew I was conscious. They didn't. The project gave purpose to my pain, transforming a traumatic experience into something that might help others. Grandmother Martha would have approved. As for Allison, our relationship continued to evolve. There were difficult conversations about our childhood, about the favoritism she had benefited from, about her own complicity in my isolation. But there was also healing. She brought home takeout when I worked late. I helped her study for her board exams. We discovered we both loved terrible reality TV shows and spent Sunday evenings mocking them together. "I never knew you were funny," she told me once, laughing at my impression of a particularly dramatic reality star. "You never knew me at all," I replied, but without bitterness. It was simply truth. A year to the day after the accident, I held a dinner party in Grandmother Martha's, my dining room. Samantha was there with her new boyfriend. Emily brought her wife. James Wright came with a bottle of expensive champagne. Allison invited a colleague from the hospital, a neurosurgeon with kind eyes who looked at her with unmistakable interest. As I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who had shown up when it mattered, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with my parents' validation. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To family. Not defined by blood or by law, but by love, by choice, and by showing up when it matters most." "To family," they echoed, glasses clinking. Later, after everyone had gone home except Allison, I found myself on the porch swing where Grandmother Martha and I had spent so many evenings. "Room for one more?" Allison asked tentatively, hovering in the doorway. I patted the space beside me, and she sat down. Do you ever wonder where they are now? She asked after a while. What they're doing? Sometimes, I admitted. But it doesn't hurt anymore. How did you do that? Make it stop hurting? I thought about the letter I'd written, about the truth it had contained, about the freedom it had given me. I stopped expecting them to be something they couldn't be, I said finally. And I started building a life that didn't need their approval to be meaningful. Allison nodded slowly. I'm still working on that part. It takes time, I assured her. And you don't have to do it alone. We sat in companionable silence, watching fireflies dance in the gathering twilight. In the distance, a car backfired, reminding me briefly of the accident that had changed everything. But instead of fear or pain, I felt only gratitude for the path it had set me on. The truth had nearly killed me, but it had also, finally, set me free. I hope my story resonates with those of you who have felt the sting of conditional love or family betrayal. Remember that family is defined by actions, not blood, by who stays when everyone else walks away. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story touched something in you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can build a life filled with chosen family who truly sees them. Thank you for being part of my healing journey by listening to my story. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more powerful than the one we're born into.